I will take this from the beginning. I'm very happy to be here tonight with two people that I appreciate and respect for their work, the role they have played in the issues concerning the coexistence of the Palestinian and Israeli people in the region, and the stance they have taken in the most difficult moments of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Most of you know that I have been and I have covered the crisis, I mean the current crisis, for 15 years, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I have said it many times that I consider Palestine and Israel my second home. And in this sense, I also feel a sense of satisfaction that the Hania Book Festival decided to include this theme in this year's events. And it is a honor for me to be asked to participate in the panels of this section. So, certainly, the greatest honor is being able to discuss everything happening in the region with Dr. Hanan Ashrawi and Gideon Levy. And I thank them both for accepting the invitation to be here with us tonight, Gideon Levy, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi. So, good evening from Athens. Thank you very much. Sorry, from Hania, yes.
From Hania.
It's the jet lag. So, thank you for being here with us, or for joining us, to be correct. Since I don't want to spend time to describe the framework of the conversation and the situation in the Middle East, I will assume that you are all aware and well-read. And I will start the conversation right away with no introduction, so we can hear them as much as possible. I don't think I need to introduce Gideon Levy and Hanan Ashrawi, but if you feel like, I can say that Hanan Ashrawi is a renowned Palestinian politician, legislator, and scholar, known for her lifelong advocacy and work for Palestinian rights, freedom, and self-determination. And of course, Gideon Levy, he is a journalist, columnist, and writer, columnist in Haaretz, and writer. So I will start with one question for both of you. I will start with Hanan Ashrawi, and I will ask you why you couldn't be here with us tonight. And I will ask Gideon Levy to answer after Hanan Ashrawi why you could come here, why you can be here with us tonight. Dr. Hanan.
Thank you, Panos, and thank everybody for setting up this conversation. I have refrained for a long time from addressing mainstream media, but discussions and meetings like this, it is my pleasure to be part of it, although virtually and not in person. I would really love to have been able to join you in person. And Crete has a very special relationship with Palestine, but also the Greek people, not government, have a special relationship with Palestine. Let me say we are, as Gideon will tell you, we live in a state of siege and fragmentation. Palestine and the West Bank, in particular Gaza, is undergoing, as you know, genocide and is unable in any way to move or leave. But in the West Bank, we do have a state of siege. The Israeli army controls everything. We do not have an airspace, an airport. We do not have a seaport. We have only one exit point, and it is controlled by Israel across the River Jordan into Jordan. So our side is controlled by Israel, and then we have to go to Jordan, and from Jordan we have to go to the airport and find the planes and so on. That sounds very simple, but the West Bank is under the control of 1,000 checkpoints. And these checkpoints are run by the Israeli military. Sometimes they're open, most of the time they're closed. They're supposed to be open, but then they're arbitrarily closed. So you'll be driving to go to the bridge or to go to Jericho to be able to leave, and you are stopped or the checkpoint is closed. And that's the least of our worries. A trip that should take you 15 minutes, for example, to Jerusalem, takes you between 2.5 to 4 or 5 hours because of these checkpoints and trying to find ways around them. But the most difficult part is not just the arbitrariness and the fact that one soldier can decide to create a jam where you have hundreds and thousands of cars waiting and unable to move, is the settler violence. The settlers have been unleashed in the West Bank in ways that are extremely lethal and very disruptive. They set up their own checkpoints. They attack cars, they attack people, they attack homes, they burn crops. They carry out pogroms at will, and they are supported and protected by the army. So you never know when you have a settler attack or when you can drive through one place to the other. This is what everybody goes through. At the same time, crossing the bridge is not easy because they might close it, because they decided, that having gone through all these checkpoints and taken all the risks, then they decided to close the bridge for a while. Since it's not open anyway, except for a few hours, the pileup of people trying to leave is enormous. And then the expenses are enormous. I don't need to talk about money and so on, but this is one way in which Israel makes loads of money off the Palestinians and at the same time controls their movement. So simply, we have no freedom of movement. We do not have any type of control over our infrastructure, our roads, as I said, our crossing points. That makes it extremely difficult to move, and to go somewhere is taking a risk, and at the same time is not easy at all. So one has to be extremely selective, for me, for example, to be able to leave or to travel or to go to Jordan so I can leave. And that's why most of my contacts outside are done through the internet and virtual reality. And it's something that really makes life extremely difficult and controls our interaction with the rest of the world. And it makes it extremely dangerous. But add to that the normal aggravations of getting your visas, and it's difficult for Palestinians to get visas. I have a Schengen visa, but still I need to renew now my travel document and my ID, because I'm a Jerusalemite and I have to have my ID renewed and my travel document renewed to be able to travel. So at this time I need to do that. Anyway, there are all sorts of obstacles, some of them physically dangerous and some of them just systematic aggravations. And some of them are a result of a massive system of control where Israel redefines the value of your time and your energy. And that's why to circumvent all these things and to overcome all these obstacles, the best way is to be able to use modern technology and to be able to join you virtually.
Let me go to Gideon Levy as well and to have an answer on that. Most probably you are used to talk via internet, through the web with people from the other side, and not to have a physical contact, even though that I have to mention that you belong to this kind of Israelis, of Israeli journalists, that every Friday you are visiting West Bank, you are visiting the occupied territories with your photographer Alex Libak, and to work and to be in touch with them.
So first of all, let me thank you and the organizers for inviting me here. Catherine and I, my wife, we are here 24 hours now, and we are just in love with the island, with the people, not first time in Greece, obviously. And you asked before, why did you come? I came first of all because I love so much Greece and the Greek people. Really, we feel really at home in many ways.
It wasn't why you did come, but why you can come,
sure,
and she cannot come here.
Sure.
That's what.
Sure. So, and I'm obviously very honored to be on the same stage together with Mrs. Ashrawi, a legendary leader of the Palestinian people. I would like to say that none of us, all the people in this hall, you, Panos, and me, we cannot imagine ourselves what does it mean to live as a Palestinian under the Israeli occupation. We have no clue. You ask why I could come here? I could come here because I am a privileged Jew who gains all the freedoms, including freedom of speech still. I'm totally free to express my views in Israel, thanks to my newspaper, obviously, and I'm surely totally free to move wherever I want. But I am the privileged side in this story. I'm the white person in apartheid South Africa. And the whites had also elections, and they called themselves a democracy. Exactly like Israel defines itself as a democracy, when in our backyard there are 2 million in Gaza and 1 million, 1.5 million in the West Bank who live without any rights, not only any rights. They are the only people in the world without citizenship. Imagine yourself. The most oppressed people in the world has at least a citizenship. They even don't have a citizenship, most of them. Part still has the Jordanian citizenship, but most of them have no citizenship. But this is really the formality. I think that none of us can imagine himself living under this regime for so many years. And those of you, and I guess in this crowd there are some people who have been to the West Bank, will not recognize it if they have not been there in the last 3 years. The changes in the West Bank in the last 3 years are dramatic, and most of them are irreversible. If we thought that hell is there until 3 years ago, what is happening now, as you rightly said, Panos, I travel there at least once a week, not on Friday, on Monday. Friday it's published. But from week to week, I see a new reality. From week to week. It starts with, as Mrs. Ashrawi rightly mentioned, with the 1,000 checkpoints. You cannot move. It was never like this in the West Bank, even not in the Intifada. You cannot move. You know, when in Israel they close the roads for a night, for constructions, for 5 hours, they put announcement in the newspaper 3 weeks before, every day, be careful, on the night of Thursday, this road will be closed for 5 hours for construction. Those people can wake up in the morning and have no clue what will be open, what will be closed. Just to give you the idea, all the villages, the settlements, the Palestinian settlements, and the cities in the West Bank, all of them are now locked by gates. It looks like one huge prison or one huge concentration camp. Part of the gates are open, part of the gates are locked. A soldier of 19, as Mrs. Ashrawi said, can come in any given moment and just lock the gate, and the city is closed. Take the city of Hebron, which is 250,000 people. There was one maybe terrorist who came out of Hebron 3 weeks ago. He tried to run over a settler. We don't know if it was an accident. Let's say it was a terror action. As a punishment, as a collective punishment, Hebron was totally locked. No car could get in for 2 weeks. No car can get out. How can you live your life like this? Add to this the fact that no Palestinian can get to work in Israel, which was the main source of income. For 3 years, no Palestinian can work in Israel. And add to the fact that there is not a single day now in the West Bank without a pogrom. Not a single day. Part of them are published, part of them are not published. But on a daily basis, violent settlers together with the army are attacking all kinds of villages, shepherds communities, cities, neighborhoods. This week I was in one of the most wealthy villages in the West Bank. Yeah, they call it the Beverly Hills of Ramallah. All Americans, all American passport. And they came and started to burn houses in order to burn the people who are in it, in those houses. Luckily enough, there are enough security means in every house there that they didn't succeed. They just burned 5 cars. But how can you conduct a normal life when there is no work, no freedom, no security? Nobody, again, they are not only the only people without citizenship, they are the only people without anyone to guard them, to protect them. When they are attacked, they have no one to call, because the Palestinian Authority cannot come to help them, and the Israeli police doesn't want to come to help them.
Because I want to come to the settler issue later on in our conversation. Let me interrupt you to go back to Dr. Hanan Ashrawi. I want to go the opposite way. I mean, to start from nowadays and to finish this conversation, our conversation with both of you, with Camp David. So starting from nowadays, and if we go back in time and reach the moment when the joint operation of Israel and United States of America against Iran began, the last thing we could imagine would be Donald Trump taking distance from Netanyahu 1 year later, calling victory the mess which came out by this war, and negotiating like no one else in the past with Tehran on all issues on the table. Why is the Palestinian issue is not included in this negotiation, or at least the situation in Gaza, and to demand the implementation of the Trump peace plan? Why no one put it on the table, Dr. Ashrawi?
Yeah, this is not something new. I mean, there is a sort of Western approach that the Palestinians are an issue that can be dealt with by Israel, and that all Israeli violations can be met with impunity, that even if they issue statements and condemnations and statements of horror and so on, they do not follow that up with action. Israel has never had to face any consequences because there are special relations between Israel and the West. And I say very openly, Israel is a colonial outpost. Israel does a service, military and intelligence and the information service and so on, to the West. And that's why they keep coordinating with it and helping it and trading with it and maintaining economic relations and so on, even though there are decisions by the court, by the ICC and by the ICJ that what Israel is doing is genocidal, unacceptable, and it is incumbent upon all parties to engage and intervene. So the verbal level sometimes is there. The popular level, the public, is very supportive. Now there's a massive shift, a sea shift in the way they deal with Palestine as well. And they are speaking out and protesting, even though governments are not. But there is a sense that in big power politics, so to speak, Iran takes precedence. Lebanon now takes precedence because of Hezbollah and so on, and they need to maintain security. And since the basic assumption is Israel's security, they do everything to maintain Israel's security at the expense of everybody else. Now, in Palestine, the occupation and the ethnic cleansing and the sort of displacement-replacement paradigm that has taken place, not just since 1948, but even before, the issue of the erasure of Palestine, the demonization and dehumanization of the Palestinians, the total control of, in the public domain, of the public discourse and even political discourse by Israel and its allies on the Palestinian reality. There's a pattern of behavior that even when they see mass murder, even when they see mass bombing, even when they see 80% of Gaza destroyed, all universities, all hospitals, all infrastructure, roads, water, and so on, and people are dying of starvation, they can't do anything about it, or there is no will to do anything about it. And this is extremely concerning because the test of the global system, of the multilateral system, even of the judicial global system, ICC, ICJ, and others, they have failed the test. That they talk about human rights, they talk about global rule of law, they talk about moral values, they talk about political moves in order to treat people equally and so on, but this doesn't apply to Palestinians at all. And this pattern has continued for decades, since the attempt at the negation and the denial of the existence of Palestine, because the Zionist movement wanted a land without a people, this whole myth for a people without a land. So they did everything possible to rob the people of the land, or deprive the land of its own people, of the indigenous people, in a variety of ways. Because when Israel was created, as you know, it was created as a result of a series of massacres that are now coming out, that are now being discussed. And some of the old-timers who took part in the massacres are now confessing as to what has happened and the way Palestinians were massacred and killed in different places in order to empty the land and to create Israel. And also the total erasure, the razing of over 500 villages without a trace, in order for the people not to be able to come back, the transformation of more than half the population into refugees expelled from their land and their homes. This pattern continues to 67 and so on. The language, the discourse, is one where Israel dominates the narrative, and the Palestinians have to prove that they deserve their rights. And we can enter into all sorts of details to show you how this has become a fact until now. Until I think the genocide of Gaza, somehow Israel could not hide it, no matter how much it tried to justify it, no matter how much it tried to play the victim, no matter how much it tried to show that the Palestinians deserve everything that happens to them, that we are all terrorists. The dehumanization and demonization involves even the term terrorism. And I tell Gideon, I don't use the term terrorist for Palestinians, because the only terror we really see in the West Bank is committed by the Israeli army and by the Israeli settlers. And to try to maintain this label, to stick it to Palestinians, whatever they do, that they have to be very good victims, that they have to lie down and die quietly, that Israel can do whatever it wants and will not be held accountable. And if you dare do anything, then of course you're a terrorist. This language, this discourse has really skewed the whole perception, the whole attitudes. Add to that, of course, the Western guilt over the Holocaust that they committed, and Western self-interest and so on, and the legacy, the colonial legacy. And you have a lethal combination that plays against the Palestinians. So now the Arabs at one point, some Arab and Islamic countries, decided that they have to do something about Palestine. They decided before and nothing happened. This time they said they need to set up some kind of system to end the genocide in Gaza. They didn't even mention the West Bank that is being swallowed up, the land being stolen, and people are being terrorized and killed daily. People don't know about how many Palestinians are killed daily in the West Bank, and the scores of people arrested and imprisoned without charge in the West Bank. And now Gaza has become almost invisible too. So this, the Board of Peace, so to speak, is a very weird, unwieldy creature that was created by Trump primarily, controlled by Trump, and with an agenda that is almost non-workable, and giving Israel, of course, massive rights, as usual, that Israel's security is dominant, and Israel stays on the land and moving in phases, and Israel refuses, as always, to withdraw from any of the territories it occupies. On the contrary, it continues to expand now in Gaza, the so-called Yellow Line that is duplicating now in Lebanon, in order to stay there, because it wants to protect its security by destroying the security of others, by stealing the land of others, and by maintaining total military control over their lives.
So allow me to interrupt you here. I will come back to this point that you mentioned right now, what is going on in Gaza and why we don't see the implementation of peace.
There's no will to implement because it means
Donald
all
Trump peace agreement. But let me go to Gideon Levy, because my question it was related to the negotiations. We have the negotiations between the United States of America and Iran. Okay, so how realistic is an agreement for the Palestinian issue, or not for the Palestinian issue, for the peace process in Middle East, without the most important unresolved issue, the Palestinian issue, and an agreement in Lebanon with the Lebanese government and Israel, without to include Hezbollah?
Without include the Hezbollah and without touching the Palestinian issue. Look, in one short sentence, I will say that the Palestinians are right now maybe in the lowest point ever. No leadership, even the struggle, the spirit of struggle is gone, beaten by the Israelis, beaten by the settlers, very, very popular in the world. There is today not a single topic in the international sphere which unites the entire world rather than solidarity and sympathy with the Palestinians and recognition at their national rights. There is no other issue, from China to Russia, from Russia to Africa, from Africa to Latin America, the EU, the United States, everyone, when it comes to public opinions, you find it everywhere. Go in the streets here and see all the slogans. There was never such a wave of sympathy with the Palestinians. But in the same time, they are not negotiated because they are not important enough to Donald Trump. They are not negotiated because, unfortunately, they are also not important enough to the Iranians. The Iranians preferred Hezbollah over Hamas and preferred Lebanon over Gaza. And because Israel is still influential and powerful enough to prevent any discussion. Now, one thing I must say here, don't expect a change from within the Israeli society. It will not happen. Israelis will not wake up one shining morning and say, oh, this occupation, this is ugly, let's put an end to it. It will never happen. The only way to get to it is through international intervention. And in the world, the problem is that there is a huge gap between public opinion, civil societies, and between the governments. Europe is still paralyzed because of guilt feelings, because of many other reasons. And the United States, the government there, I mean, you don't expect Donald Trump to care about human rights or minorities or civil rights or independence or moral questions. You don't expect this. But, and this is the more hopeful part of the story, we are facing now a major shift. I think that this gap between public opinions and governments will have to be overbridged. It cannot be that public opinions will be so fueled, so preoccupied with the Palestinian issue, and the governments will continue with the conservative policy, namely condemning Israel, warning Israel, and not taking any measures against Israel. You all remember, just one more sentence. 2 weeks after the invasion to Ukraine, the EU got decision about sanctions towards Russia, big, strong Russia. What is the difference between invasion to Ukraine and invasion to Gaza? Invasion is an invasion. And violating sovereignty is violating sovereignty. And genocide is genocide. And the world sees it and is totally stormed by it. and is not ready to take any measures. And as long as the world will not take measures, not resolutions and not condemnations, real measures, nothing will change. But there is a hope that we are now facing a shift. By the way, this shift can go all the way to the other extreme. And you see it already today. From the darling of the West, which Israel was for many, many years, it might turn now into a pariah state much worse than North Korea. There was now a survey. Israel is the most hated country in the world today. This cannot continue without having any kind of echo in the policy.
Keep the mic, because I want to stay with you, and you mentioned the shift on the foreign policy, the shift from United States of America. In your recent article in Haaretz, entitled "Donald Trump Has Fulfilled My Dream," you estimate that this harsh words of the President and the Vice President of the United States of America will not remain mere rhetoric and will be followed by actions. So I want to ask you, how big you think is the rift between United States of America and Israel? And is it between United States of America and Israel, or it's between Donald Trump and Netanyahu?
Both. It is definitely both. I can assure you that Israel will long for the days of Donald Trump, because the next president, would it be a Democrat or Republican, will not continue with the unconditioned aid to Israel. Maybe the aid will continue, and when I say aid, it is the overall support, militarily, economically, diplomatically, politically, you name it. This cannot go on an unconditioned basis. And I cannot see another, I mean, Joe Biden was the last Zionist president, and Donald Trump was maybe the last so-called friend of Israel who was ready even to go to war in Iran to serve, above all, Israeli interests. I think this is over. This is over. Why? Because more and more questions are being raised in American public opinion about where does our money go and why does it go there, and what do we gain out of this enormous, enormous aid, and does Israel really stand for American interests, and does Israel really listen to us from time to time? Everything that Israel did in the last decades was against the official American policy. Settlements, she just ignored the American attitude. The way that the IDF is behaving both in the West Bank and in Gaza, total ignoring the American position. Two-state solution, it's the declared policy of the United States, it's the declared policy of the EU, it's the declared policy of the PA, it's the declared policy of the entire world. And Israel in the last 10 years, 15 years, did anything possible to sabotage the two-state solution. And I can tell you today that we are farther than ever from the two-state solution. In my view, but that's my personal view, this solution is dead. This train left the station. We have to find a new solution. There will be no Palestinian state because the settlers won. There will be no Palestinian state because Israel did anything possible to prevent it and succeeded. And we have to realize it and not continue to speak about the two-state solution as if speaking about it will promote it. No, speaking today about the two-state solution is just playing to the hands of the occupation, because people say, oh, we have a solution, but not now. Let's wait one day. And meanwhile, Israel is strengthening the occupation more and more. You know that in the last 3 years, the settlers took over more lands than the entire settlement project ever since '67, only in 3 years. They took over hundreds of thousands of dunams in the West Bank, hundreds of thousands. Those are irreversible facts. This is a new reality, and we have to face it.
You know, the last time I came I visit Israel and Palestine, I visited a group of Gush Etzion settlements. And I visited one of our colleagues in the past, Tzvika Hitzkeli. So he's a hardline settler. So he told me that this 7th of October event, terrorist attack, it was a window of opportunity. And this was the result that you described. But I want to have the projection of Hanan Ashrawi as well for this shift of mood of United States of America, of diplomacy, of policies from Washington towards Israel. I mean, do you agree with what Gideon Levy mentioned before?
I agree, yes, but I would like to add something extremely significant. The main motivation of the US and other countries, of course, in the West is self-interest. And in the US, it becomes also personal, because Trump makes policy individually and shifts and changes daily depending on what's in his interest, as you saw. So he was dragged into war or pushed into war by Israel to attack Iran to satisfy Israeli needs, because they told him that all you need to do is just start this bombing, kill their leaders, and the whole system will collapse, and then you will be the hero who destroyed Iran, and so on. But also don't forget that many of his donors in the US are very strong Zionists and very wealthy Zionists, who, including Miriam Adelson and others, not just AIPAC. I mean, there are all sorts of other organizations. Even AIPAC now has new organizations to avoid the name AIPAC that are funding politicians, that are paying and buying politicians, so to speak. So that's why when we talk about a gap between the people, and I agree, public opinion is shifting massively against Israel, because Israel cannot hide anymore. It cannot use language. It is using millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to try to change the discourse, to try to control the public domain, but they're unable to do so because of social media, because people are arriving at the truth without seeing it filtered through Israeli eyes and presentations. But people, governments, not just in the US. In the US, it's very obvious because of a long tradition, a long history of self-interest, of control of the whole electoral system in the US, where you need to make money in order to run. And the people who fund your campaigns and so on are the people whose interests you serve. It was a joke that whenever, not a joke, even some congressmen said this, that whenever they want to take a decision, the first question they ask is, how will this go down with AIPAC and with Israel? And many of the resolutions of Congress were taken on that basis. Because if you look at the list of congressmen and women of both houses and how much money they took from AIPAC and pro-Israeli sources, it's incredible. And yet AIPAC is not registered as under the FARA Act as a foreign agent. That's another thing. So there are other interests. In Greece, for example, why should there be military cooperation, economic cooperation? Why should there be intelligence cooperation? Even though we know that historically the Greek people, and previously Greek governments, but now the Greek people have been so supportive, there is a sort of affinity between the Palestinians and the Greeks, in a sense, and we feel partly Greek, and there's intermarriage between Palestinians and Greeks. How come governments can get away with these things without reference to their people? Look, even in the UK, they recognize Palestine, and yet they are calling Palestine Action people terrorists. They're dragging 70, 80-year-old people to jail and sentencing them under the Terrorist Act because they stood against Elbit, the weapons manufacturing company, the Israeli.
Dr. Ashrawi,
So there is this gap. I mean, look, we cannot ignore this, but leaders so far have hijacked the agenda based on their own interests. Governments have done that. Gradually, they have made concessions to try in order to win back their public. But until and unless this is translated, this ground wave, this shift in public opinion is translated into votes, and unless they hold their governments accountable, the governments are able to continue business as usual. Britain will sell weapons, Germany will defend Israel no matter what, and other governments will sign agreements and so on, and the Palestinians will continue to be invisible victims. But this has to change from within. As Gideon said, they cannot afford to continue like this. And if you manage to harness the power of the people and the public in order to challenge their own governments, Israel doesn't care. It says, you can do whatever you want, you can say whatever you want, provided we do whatever we want. And they're saying it now. Look at Gaza, look at what's happening in Gaza. They've taken 70% now, almost 80%, of a land that has been devastated, that has been totally demolished. And they have, crushed people into 20 to 30% of a land that was already densely populated. And they're dying still of hunger. They haven't allowed any food or provisions to come in. They haven't allowed tents and any type of shelter to come in. And they still shoot and kill daily.
Let me ask you something. You described where the foreign governments, you described before, where the foreign governments standing and where the societies, and that you lost the support on the Palestinian issue from the foreign governments. Can I ask you where the Palestinian Authority is standing, what the Palestinian Authority is doing? I mean, who are the partners of the Palestinian Authority abroad, with whom you are talking, with whom you are in touch? On the other hand, okay, you have the foreign policy, the international relationships, and in the same time you have the genocide in Gaza and you have the ethnic cleansing in West Bank. What the Palestinian Authority is doing for their people? I mean, what they are doing, I noticed 2 months ago, if I'm not wrong, you had the municipal elections, and I was really surprised. I was trying to understand how you can have a municipal elections during the time that you have the attacks of the settlers that are burning houses, villages, cars, they're destroying the houses of the people, and you are coming to have a municipal elections after 20 years for what? To pretend the normality in the place? I mean, what was the target of these elections?
It's a long story, but I can tell you very frankly, the Palestinian Authority is missing in action in many ways. It has lost its credibility. I'm not talking about the different ministers who are professionals trying to work, but I'm talking about the whole political system, the decision-making system, starting with the presidency and onwards. It is missing in action because it suffers from the erroneous assumption that its longevity and its survival depends on the approval of the West. It depends on being nice to the Israelis. They set up criteria for the authority that you cannot, for example, defend your people against the settlers. And I said before, and I repeat, we are the only people being held responsible for the safety of our occupier, for the safety of the settlers, for the safety of the invading army, of the occupation army. And not only that, should we seek recourse in international courts and arenas, then we are punished. Israel is stealing the funds, the customs money of the authority. The authority is going bankrupt. And it can't do anything about it because the world is not forcing, is not making Israel pay back the Palestinian money that it is stealing, let alone stopping killing and destroying and so on. So the authority has lost support and credibility from its own people. They are seeing it as trying to appeal to the West, trying to be Mr. Nice Guy, trying even to appeal to Israel, trying to not to upset the apple cart. Even Lebanon today signed an agreement that they're not going to take Israel to the international courts and multilateral agencies and so on. This is ridiculous. You're depriving the victim of the right, not just to self-defense, but the right to appeal to international courts and international multilateral systems. This is one thing. So you don't expect much from the authority that is virtually, it is bankrupt, it hasn't been paying salaries. All civil service has been getting half their salaries, if any, for the last 3 years or more. The hospitals are unable to function, the doctors are on strike, the schools are barely able to function. I'm the head of the board of trustees of Birzeit University, and if the situation continues like this, no university, no school can survive, because students cannot pay fees. I tell people we get scholarships. They say, even if you give our children scholarships, we don't have the money for them to take public transport to get to the university. We don't have the money to give them pocket money, because there's a very high level of unemployment, and because those who are in the civil service are not getting full pay, they are barely able to survive. And of course, the work in Israel has been stopped, the workers' families now. And the farmers, the crops are being stolen or destroyed. The olive crop was totally devastated, because the settlers are not only burning down and cutting trees and so on, they are also stealing the crops. If the Palestinian farmers manage to get to their land and manage to try to get the olive crops, and then they attack them and they take away the crops. So it's, in every possible way, this is a helpless authority. And the West says you have to prove you are good little boys and girls by, first of all, changing your textbooks, change your school curricula, do not talk about Israel as the enemy, talk about good neighborly relations and so on. Don't use the Palestinian narrative. They want us to adopt the Israeli narrative. Again, I don't want to go into details, but this is how they define reform. The other type of reform, you cannot pay funds to the families of prisoners. You cannot support the families of martyrs or those who were killed by Israel. There's a very horrific statement called pay to slay that was invented by Israel and is being repeated by the American apologists for Israel, as though the Palestinian Authority pays the Palestinians to become terrorists or to kill Israelis. It's incredible the way they're doing this. And to reform, you have to change the system so you don't have any social security for people who have lost their sole provider and who have lost their children. And as you know, daily you have people being killed. Israel has arrested over 30,000 since 73 from the West Bank. There are 10,000 still in jail, but people have lost their livelihood. And most of these people are not tried. There are no charges. There is no evidence. What is called administrative detention means that you can be picked up and you put in jail and you have no recourse. And all they can claim is security reasons, so they don't disclose why you are arrested. And you can spend years and years. And you come out tortured, debilitated. If you come out, many of them have been killed in prison. So it's a horrific scene. And the authority cannot protect its own people, can barely deliver services to its own people. And everybody says, where is it? Well, it's been destroyed, frankly. And when you lose the support and the credibility with your own people, you cannot import support and credibility from outside. And the world outside is not very supportive of the Palestinian leadership at all, or the political system. We know that.
So I'm going back to Gideon Levy, and I want to take you to something different, the reshaping of the powers in Middle East, as we see that in the shadow of the developments in Middle East, some alliance to be formed that a few years ago would have been unimaginable. I'm talking about the diplomatic cooperation of Turkey with Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and in the same time you have Donald Trump talking to al-Sarraj in Syria to check the option maybe to play a role in Lebanon and to face the Syrian army, to face Hezbollah. So we see that there is something moving in a way of a creation of wider Sunni bloc in Middle East. So what does it mean, and how does Israel approach it? I mean, is it related to Israel's attitude and actions, which are maybe scaring and rallying countries that were competitors in the past to come together?
So no doubt that the 7th of October did a whole earthquake, both inside Israel and around the entire Middle East. We will not go to the whole historical context, but it's very clear that nothing, but nothing, after the 7th of October looks like what it was before, including the strategic camps or coalitions in the Middle East. And I agree to your description, but let us not have any illusion. Whatever will be, take the Abraham Accords, really a positive development. Israelis go to Dubai more than to any other country. Dubai became the hub of the flights from Israel to the east, and it looks peaceful, and it is peaceful, and there is economical collaboration and scientific collaboration and security collaboration. A dream. None of those things will last as long as the core issue of the Palestinian problem will not be solved. Israel is trying to find all kinds of bypasses in order to put the Palestinian issue aside, to put it off the table, and it is succeeding in this. But it will return again and again because it is a bleeding wound ever since 48, and it will continue to bleed, and there will be some years in which Israel will maybe flourish with all kinds of new allies and new partnerships, and it will get back to us again and again, partly as an excuse, partly because it is a real wound which is bleeding and projecting the entire Middle East. Yes, there is a lot of hypocrisy from the Arab states and the West toward the Palestinian, a lot of double standards, a lot of hollow cliches and slogans, and finally they are again bleeding aside of the road, finally maybe more lonely than ever. I think that right now the Palestinians were never so lonely, except of the public opinion that we spoke about. But all those new coalitions which pay attention to them, all of them leave the Palestinians out of the road. Yeah, none of those coalitions will promote the Palestinian issue. But the Palestinian issue will come back again and again. And therefore this illusion that we can bypass the Palestinian question. And just to add one sentence to what Mrs. Ashrawi said, I think that behind all this behavior of Israel, there is a plan. For many years I thought there is no plan. And the plan is finally to crash the Palestinian society until it will become a camp of handicapped, poor, starving, wounded, immigrants community, without any leadership, without any political organization, without any functioning society. You see it in Gaza. Israel opposed any civil solution for Gaza. Hamas out of the question. PA out of the question. International involvement out of the question. Why is it so? Because Israel wants to crash the society, and then bigger dreams can become true. Same for the West Bank. Trying to crash the society as a functioning society. And then things will be much easier for Israel to go to the next step. So we shouldn't underestimate all those steps and just think that it's just evil steps or illegal steps. There is a plan behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, the plan is not new. And the extreme right and the Zionist fundamentalists have been working systematically within this plan. the sort of the erasure of Palestine in a variety of ways.
Dr. Ashrawi, if we look at the Palestinian issue today, I mean 2.5 years after the 7th of October 2023, you can say that that date was the catalyst for highlighting the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian drama and the occupation, or did it function as a tool for definitive removal of the Palestine state? I mean, of the conversation for a two-state solution and Palestinian state. I mean, the resistance at the end of the day, it served the needs of the Palestinian people or brought the opposite results?
Well, actually, this was, as you said earlier, somebody wrote that they served Israeli interests in the sense that Israel took this as an opportunity in order to carry out the most extreme ethnic cleansing and genocidal agendas that it had in order to destroy Palestine. The 7th of October became the rallying cry, the justification for anything that they want to do to the Palestinians, and totally decontextualized. I keep reminding people that Gaza was under a siege that was totally destroying any kind of life in Gaza, Gideon. It wasn't just after the October. Gaza, the people of Gaza were unable to leave or come back. They could not bring in the food and the equipment and supplies that they needed. Israel said we withdrew, but it controlled everything. The airspace, the territorial waters, no airports, no crossing points except through Israel. So it controlled Gaza completely and turned life into a living hell for the Gazans. And every few years, it would bomb and shell and destroy whole neighborhoods and kill thousands of people and then sit back and wait. And then a few years later, it would do the same. And it would use the fact that Hamas or whatever used weapons against Israel. Now, Israel has the strongest army in the region. Israel has the most sophisticated weapons. Israel has the most sophisticated intelligence system. It observes us everywhere. It knows where we're going, where we're heading, what we're eating, what we're saying, constantly. And then to say that they were surprised or that this is one way they can get security is by crushing, literally crushing the people of Gaza, or now by literally stealing the land of the Palestinians, the lands of the Palestinians, and turning them into people who are unable to survive as an entity, as a political civil society. This is incredible because from the beginning of the Zionist agenda, and I always quote Ilan Pape, he said it was a displacement-replacement paradigm. It was an ethnic cleansing. He called his first book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And the extreme Zionist agenda, in order to work itself out, had to render the Palestinians first invisible and then non-existent. It tried to render us silent. It tried to claim that we had no rights, no history, nothing, and they tried to superimpose a continuous presence of Israel on Palestine when it didn't exist. And so the whole issue of is this new, did the 7th of October create this? No, the 7th of October was a very convenient excuse. Remember, they waited a few hours before they responded, and then Netanyahu immediately said, this is war. War against whom? Against whom? So he branded everybody as Hamas. Hamas are total, vicious, unforgivable, horrible, inhuman terrorists, and therefore we are justified to do anything we want to them. And everybody in Gaza is Hamas, supportive of Hamas, families of Hamas, and so on. So every time they kill a few thousand, they say, we've killed terrorists, we've destroyed them, we've eliminated the terrorist threat. Or they bomb a hospital, they say Hamas had the tunnel under the hospital. They destroyed all the universities at the beginning. Why? Hamas had tunnels under the universities. I mean, this is ridiculous. Using this language, it became very common language. And people didn't stop to look at the reality. So no, it's one station along the way of the elimination of the Palestinian people in a variety of ways, of the genocide, but it has become the most tragic and drastic because it was done in plain sight and systematically and relentlessly, and massacres and torture and carnage. And the whole world was looking. That to me is the incredible, unconscionable issue, is you're seeing people killed daily, and you're seeing them being starved, and you see all aspects, all requirements of a normal life being destroyed, and you cannot stop this rogue state, this maniacal murder, and you cannot stop it, you cannot intervene, you cannot stop weapons or assistance. Israel's economy is on the rise, the shekel is on the rise. Why? Because everybody's buying Israeli weapons, tried and tested, Israeli munitions, Israeli inventions, and so on, because they've been tried over living experimental people. And that's the whole thing. No, it didn't do Palestine a service. It did, of course, bring attention to the Palestinian question, but it's not just attention. We have now the ability to address people, and we have had the ability to break through the distortions and the siege on our discourse and our narrative. But what's the point if you know, and if knowledge is not a responsibility, and if knowledge is not translated into action, and if there are no consequences, let alone if there are no curves, if you cannot stop a genocide, if you cannot stop the total sabotage of the two-state solution, how can you keep talking about the two-state solution? It's just so that Western leaders can say, you know, I've done my national duty, and I've pat myself on the shoulder, and I said the right thing, or even I recognize Palestine. But you're seeing Palestine disappear before your eyes. You're seeing the Palestinians being tortured daily in a variety of ways, and you're doing nothing. And then if you want a two-state solution, do something about it. But you've waited too long, and I'm afraid it's become too late unless you are able to influence Israel to begin dismantling settlements, to withdraw from Palestine, to recognize that Palestinian self-determination is not just a slogan, you can talk about it. But then you cannot expect, and I feel this is something that many countries want, you cannot expect the Palestinians to become Zionists. Because Israel, that's the only good Palestinian to Israel, is a Zionist Palestinian. I don't see why we have to accept Zionism as an ideology, even within the two-state solution, because it has proven to the world that it is a racist, exclusivist, superior ideology that claims superior rights and exclusivity of rights. As a justification, it can do anything it wants to other people without any kind of engagement, intervention, or accountability. That's the problem. So if you wish us to exist in a two-state solution, within these conditions, and given this mentality, and given the pain and the horror of what's going on, it's not going to work. It's not just the settlement. It's the fact that how can you have the victim and the perpetrator talking to each other in the same language, as though there is a false symmetry, as though all things are normal, it's only a conflict. It's not a border conflict, it's one people ruling and lording over another people and destroying them in the process. And you're saying you have to be good victims, and you have to negotiate nicely, and you have to end this. There is no peace process. Whom are we kidding? There is no intention to talk to Palestinians. They don't want to have peace. They want to be able to finish this agenda, to control over all of Palestine, and in the process destroy it.
So
Gaza being an example, but it has been ongoing for decades.
Without to know that, you brought up the next subject I wanted to discuss with Gideon Levy. Parliamentary elections actually are scheduled for next October. So no doubt that there is dissatisfaction with Benjamin Netanyahu inside Israel, I mean between the Israeli voters. Where is this dissatisfaction coming out from? I mean, where is it based? It's based because it's the image that the actions of the Israeli government create around the world for the Israelis, and they dislike him because of that. It is because he didn't finish the job that he promised to them, to finish the job in Lebanon, to finish the job in Iran, so they are not satisfied. And on the other hand, is this enough? I mean, the dissatisfaction to finish Benjamin Netanyahu politically? And even if the answer is yes, what is the alternative? I mean, Eisenkot with Lapid and Bennett to make a coalition, something will change the day after without Benjamin Netanyahu, or it's what Dr. Hanan Ashrawi said before, it's the Zionist approach of the political system of Israel, which at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who is the prime minister, the policies are the same.
Everything you said is true. The good news are that I truly believe that Netanyahu will not be the next prime minister of Israel. The bad news are that it will not matter enough. Those who expect Israel to turn into a paradise after Netanyahu will go on, because there is a tendency in the world and also within Israel to blame everything on Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the evil, and once we get rid of him, we'll get back to this nice old Israel who was oriented to make peace with its neighbors, who had no feeling of supremacy of the Palestinians, who believed that the Palestinians are human beings exactly like us and they deserve the same national rights. No. Now I will try to explain. Netanyahu lost his popularity, but he has still a great camp of fans who will follow him blindly no matter what he does. No matter what he does. He can do, like populist leaders, he can do whatever he wants, they will support him blindly. The question, how big is this camp? I don't see that this camp is shrinking. I don't see it happening. They believe in him. He is the most hated and the most beloved and adored politician that Israel had ever had, no doubt. Nobody was so beloved and so hated like him. And this will go on. There are no cracks in the camp of his fans, there are no cracks. They continue to support him. There was a great movement of protest in Israel, as you know, in recent years. First, it was about the hostages, very strong movement, which were very devoted every week to release the hostages. Then, even before this, it was about what he calls the legal or the juristic reform, which is basically turn Israel from a democracy to a Jewish citizens at least to a non-liberal democracy. So the sentiments were there. What was lacking is, as usual in all Israeli protests, the elephant in the room. Nobody touched it. People were fighting for democracy in Israel while ignoring the fact that Israel cannot be a democracy when it runs the fate of 4 million Palestinians without any rights. What kind of democracy is it? What is this game to call Israel a democracy when in its backyard there's one of the most brutal regimes in the world today? And we are not talking about a military occupation, because military occupation, according to the international law, must be temporary. It is now 59 years. You tell me that 59 years is a temporary phenomena, and you don't see any sign that it's going to end. So they were fighting for democracy, ignoring the elephant in the room, but all those things brought some cracks. There was a full support in the wars. All wars of the last 3 years were totally supported by Israelis. In Israel, it's much easier to get support for wars than for peace. And we saw it in the past. 93% of the Israelis supported the war with Iran. This is a figure that you can get only in North Korea. There is no majority of 93% in any democracy. 93% of Israelis, Jewish Israelis, supported the war with Iran. It decreased, but there is still support in all the wars. Lebanon, Gaza, Iran, smaller, much smaller, but still support. So the wars and the occupation are not the issue. The issue is the corruption of Netanyahu. The issue is the reform, the legal reform. The issue is the feeling that he took us, maybe it starts now, to unnecessary wars. Yes, more and more Israelis believe that the war in Iran was unnecessary, that we are in Lebanon for nothing, and then they see that there are also no results and no achievement whatsoever, it becomes stronger. So if there will be not a change of the last minute, and Netanyahu is a magician when it comes to elections, if there will be no real change, he's not going to be the next prime minister. But as I said, unfortunately, none of the candidates carry with him a promise for a real new chapter. And without a real new chapter, nothing will be solved. Yes, there will be less corruption and more taking care of the state and not only about your own ego and your own personal interest. Nicer people in the parliament, more efficient, all very good things. But they will not touch the core issues.
Dr. Ashrawi, we talked before about the resistance and how it influenced the Palestinian issue. We talked about the Palestinian Authority in the same time, where the Palestinian Authority stands and how supportive it is for the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank. So I want to ask you, why does Palestinian society not react, like in the Second Intifada, for example? Why do we no longer see any armed resistance after all this violence from the settlers as a reaction? Does it have to do with the appeal of the resistant movements, with the role of the Palestinian Authority, that they don't want to see an active armed movement, or with the reality that Israel has imposed and a fate similar to Gaza? So this is frightening the society, this is frightening the people, and they're keeping the distance from the armed resistance.
Well, you mentioned many of the reasons, but yes, there's a variety of reasons. It's not just one thing. First of all, we talked about the system of total control. When Israel controls everything, I mean, we are the most observed people on earth. Everywhere you go, there are. It's not just the drones and all these things. There are cameras literally everywhere, every street. They engage, they enter homes, they enter every city, every town. Look what they did to the refugee camps in the north. For no reason whatsoever, they entered, they felt that they were a handful, I think, of a few people who were resorting to armed resistance with some very minor weapons. And they killed them, they destroyed them. And then they brought their tanks and ran through the refugee camps and re-engineered the demography and the geography of the camps in order, first of all, to destroy the whole idea of refugees and the right of return, but also in order to prevent any emergence of any type of armed resistance in the West Bank. But the West Bank has been under very strict control. So when they try to tell you there are weapons in the West Bank, and the only weapons that came through the people in the Israeli army who sold weapons to some people in the West Bank. But the West Bank is largely unarmed. And it has no means now, given not just the economic situation, but also the control, the lack of freedom of movement, the observation, the security system that Israel has imposed. And it does so not just in Area C, for example, that it is emptying out, or in Areas B that it says it has security control, but also in Areas A. These are all ridiculous letters of the alphabet that were used to define our land. But anyway, so even the areas that were supposed to be under the total control of the authority are not. Daily, this morning, the Israeli army was in Ramallah, and they shot, and they used tear gas and stun grenades, and they left. Every day they enter towns and cities and villages and so on. Every city. And in order to send a message, we are in charge, we control your lives, there is nobody who will defend you. So in that sense, people began to feel that any kind of armed resistance is physically not possible. You cannot move from one area to the other. We cannot even have massive demonstrations like we used to. There's no way to get people to move from one area to the other, to assemble and to march and so on. You can't. So people said they accepted the idea of civil disobedience, of unarmed resistance, of nonviolent resistance, and so on. But even that, when people cannot feed their families, when they see their futures being destroyed, how are they going to protest? With what? There is a sense of I don't want to say helplessness, of anger, of lack of options, of lack of hope, because nobody comes to their rescue. And at the same time, their own people who are supposed to protect them need protection themselves. I mean, they cannot do anything to protect the people. So even though Palestinians keep talking about this, that we have the right to defend ourselves, that people under occupation and under genocide and cleansing and apartheid and so on have the right to defend themselves by any means available as international law guarantees, but the realities on the ground are not conducive to that. And the fact that everybody's been in a mode of survival, of self-defense, makes it difficult to take an aggressive, outgoing, whether military, armed or unarmed, even confrontations, because Israel responds with massive force, massive violence. It even bombed by air some places where, a couple of young men were hiding or whatever. In order to kill them, it bombs the house, it bombs the area, and it moves. So it sent a clear message that if you use, 1% violence, we will respond with 100% massive violence. And that message was picked up by people, but it doesn't mean the Palestinians have given up. No, there is a determination. First of all, the whole ethos of, the right of return was something that was sacred, and people kept talking about return and so on. Now people are talking also about sumud, about steadfastness, about remaining on the land. They know that the whole issue is now, the Israeli agenda is to get rid of the Palestinian people. Whether, as I read your article about the transfer, the country of transfer, it's even more, expulsion of the Palestinians. So they know that the highest form of resistance is to stay, and it is to resist the expulsion. And even if the conditions are extremely difficult, and even if the younger generation sees no hope and no future, the mere fact that we are staying here and trying to continue to build our institutions, build our lives, and to defy the Israeli agenda, this is resistance to many people. And at the same time, if they want to change their government or they want to change, they cannot. Because whom do they have? Even if we elect the most perfect people on earth, they're not going to be able to change the realities under which we live. And now Israel, of course, if you resort to any kind of legal or international multilateral complaints or recourse, then you will be punished as well. So even the authority is punished if it goes to the ICC or ICJ or the UN. It's like a total strangulation of all forms of resistance, using massive power and massive threats, but without any safety net for the Palestinians and without any engagement or intervention by the international community, who are still putting pressure on the Palestinians to change their textbooks, for heaven's sake. Or if they have whatever money, they cannot pay the families of imprisoned Palestinians. It's ridiculous, misplaced priorities. And so it's important for the Palestinians to stay, to build. And to us, this is not resistance.
So my last question for Gideon Levy, and then I have one common question for both of you. Gideon, why is the Israeli society becoming more and more radicalized? I mean, why they are not reacting to what the IDF is doing in Gaza and what the settlers, along with the Israeli army, they are doing in the West Bank? Don't tell me that they don't know, because they don't see on the news, they are not playing on the news the images from West Bank and from Gaza. I mean, every Israeli family, they have a son or a daughter in the Israeli army, so it's not enough to say that I didn't know. So why they're not reacting?
First of all, there was a big shift after the 7th of October. Not that before things were better. I mean, they were better, but they were not good. Also before the 7th of October, for decades, Israel lived in denial. Israel lived in denial with the collaboration of the Israeli media, which is a free media, but commercial and coward. And the Israeli media did not cover the occupation for decades, while dehumanizing and demonizing the Palestinians, all in the Israeli free media, voluntarily, not that there was some pressure to do so. But the 7th of October was a major shift in Israeli society. It went to two directions. Most of the Israelis, if not all of them today, think that after the 7th of October, Israel has the right to do whatever it wants. Most of the Israelis, if not all of them, think that there are no innocent people in Gaza, including not the 1,000 babies which were killed under 1 year old. Nobody is innocent in Gaza. That's the common belief. That's the mindset. And then also, obviously, most of the Israelis in the so-called peace camp said, no, we don't have a partner. We have no one to talk with the Palestinians. Look at what they have done on the 7th of October. They all carry responsibility for the 7th of October, to the crimes of the 7th of October. And really, some of my best friends just change and say, no, there is no hope for anything, and they turn their back to the whole Palestinian issue. Now, you say that the Israelis know, and I have my doubts. If you don't want to know something, you don't know it. It's one thing to know somewhere in the back of your mind, and it's another thing to know and to understand the meaning of it. I started my talk here today by saying that none of us knows what does it mean to live under the Israeli occupation. This does not mean that every one of us here, I guess people who are so interested in the issue, didn't read it, didn't see what's going on in the occupation. But still, it's one thing to experience it personally, and it's another thing to read about it, to hear about it. When it comes to Israeli media, it's much worse than this. I can assure you that any Greek citizen in the most forgotten village in the mountains saw more of Gaza than an average Israeli. The media didn't show it. And when it showed it, it always framed it in a very, very specific framework, which always put us as the victims and the victim as the aggressors. Even if it was mass killing, even if it was bombing hospitals, bombing universities, bombing anything in Gaza, with 20,000 women killed, with 20,000 children killed, it was all justified in Israeli media. And when you don't want to know it, it's much more convenient. Look, Panos, you cannot live with this occupation for so many years and live in peace with yourself. And I don't think the Israelis are not moral people or less moral people than any other moral people in the world. They just learned to deny, because only through denial you can live in peace with it. So whenever you come with them and show them facts, they will always find a justification. And those who serve in the army for sure are not witnesses, because they are totally brainwashed. A soldier of 18 who goes to stand in checkpoints, he is sure that he is saving Israel from a catastrophe, that he is saving Israel from those horrible monsters who live in the West Bank. What do you think he thinks? And he comes home and says, you don't know what a meaningful service I'm doing for my state, that I protect you from those monsters. So when those monsters are bombed, why would Israelis care about it? And then came the 7th of October and gave very good reasons or very good justifications to those who believe that they are all monsters and all born to kill, to continue to see them as non-human beings. And finally, again, I cannot conclude it without accusing the Israeli media, which is the main factor here. Because Israel media, the mainstream media, the TV, the newspapers, for decades, they show the picture in such a one-sided way that, you know, any Israeli who wants to feel comfortable with himself find it in the media. He finds all the justification in the world to the worst crimes.
So we have to close. One common question for both of you. I will start with Gideon. I will come to Hanan Ashrawi. A long time ago, Hanan Ashrawi wrote a book, and the title, you remember, it was This Side of Peace. So I don't know if he was rewriting the book today, or if he was writing another book today, if the title could stay the same. But if you look at the current situation, can you say that Camp David was the golden opportunity that the Palestinian Authority kicked then? Gideon first and Hanan Ashrawi then.
You are speaking about Camp David, you said? Camp David and not Oslo. Look, the history of the negotiations is full of missed opportunities. And the Palestinians made their own mistakes and missed opportunities. Abba Ibn, who was very good in words, said once, the legendary Israeli foreign minister, that the Palestinians never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
And I find that extremely racist.
Sorry?
I find that extremely racist.
Sure.
Very convenient shorthand to blame the Palestinians for everything.
Absolutely, but this was my next sentence, Hanan. This was one of the most hollow and incorrect sentences said ever. Yes, they missed opportunities, but Israel missed so much more, because basically, I can tell you that until this very moment, Israel didn't, from the beginning of Zionism, from the very early days in the 20s of the former century, the Israelis never accepted the Palestinians as equal human beings, and they never recognized the Palestinians as partners to share this land between Jews and Palestinians. Zionism started with Jewish superiority, and Zionism never changed ever since then. Nothing changed ever since then. And as long as this will not change, you can speak about all kinds of opportunities which were missed, but there was not one single Israeli leader who really understood that the Palestinians are equal human beings to us, and they share equal rights over this land. There was not even one.
So, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, we have 1 minute. I mean, we can make it 1.5, but that's it. So.
Well, it's not a question of missed opportunities. There's a dynamic that's been ongoing. And when you have an ongoing system of power and control and violence acting with full impunity, and not just that, but with protection and cover provided by the West and the superpowers, so to speak, then you end up with a very abnormal, unnatural situation of asymmetry and control. And everything that was attempted, political or not, was based on that. How do you get the most out of the Palestinians? And how do you accommodate Israel's security as defined in military terms? And in that sense, whatever initiative was taken, look at Camp David. I mean, I can sit down and tell you exactly what was wrong with Camp David. And I know not just the mentality, but what the different proposals were at Camp David. And they weren't conducive to peace. So if there is a peace process that contains within it an inherent idea that the Palestinians have to submit and have to be brought to their knees, and this submission you can for peace by maintaining Israel's superiority and control, not a single process began with recognition of the Palestinian right to self-determination or statehood. And Gideon is absolutely right that they never looked at the Palestinians as equals with equal rights. And then they started legislating that way, that right to self-determination in Israel applies only to Jews. What happens to the indigenous people who remained in Palestine that became later Israel? They don't have the right to self-determination. So Israel created an apartheid system within itself. And then the people under occupation and the people in Gaza and the people in Jerusalem, they have different types of oppression and discrimination practiced. And because they can do it and get away with it, in a sense, it became a toxic atmosphere, a toxic context for anything. And those who claim to want to make peace, including the Americans and others, never really, not just understood, but never had the serious intention of ending the occupation, of understanding that there is a need. If you talk about peace, then there has to be parity, then there has to be the will to deal with the causes of instability and violence. As I said at the beginning, this is not a conflict.
Okay.
This is oppression and occupation and attempts at the total eradication of the people. So until we understand that and understand the nature of the Zionist ideology, you cannot bring Palestinians and Israelis to talk and say, okay, you can have peace. You have to deal with the conditions on the ground before you have peace.
So, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, for joining us from Ramallah. Thank you for your participation. Thank you very much, Gideon Levy, for being here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, ευχαριστούμε και εσάς.
Thank you, Panos.
Thanks, Hanan. Have a good night from Chania.
You too. Thank you.